Coffee Conversations about Influencer Marketing is brought to you by Webfluential, a strategic consultancy that takes the guesswork out of influencer marketing for your brand. We provide much needed strategically crafted frameworks on how to implement influencer campaigns specific to your brand needs. Welcome back to yet another episode of Coffee Conversations about Influencer Marketing. Today we are discussing the changes that Facebook made to Facebook and Instagram and how that will affect influencer marketing going forward. Whether you're an influencer or marketer, this will affect you. To talk to us about this and give us all the insights and information we need is Murray Legg. Murray is a technology entrepreneur with a focus on SaaS products for marketing and financial industries. He's worked in a range of industries, from medical device design to investment banking. He has a passion for working in emerging social capital of influencers and how they ignite and steer public opinion, connections, and commerce. We had a very interesting conversation about the changes Facebook has made. So without any further delay, let's listen to today's conversation. Thanks for tuning in. So thank you, Murray, for joining us today. Please, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and why you got into influencer marketing and maybe how?
Sure. Thank you so much for including me and taking some time to chat to me. So I'm an engineer and I love everything that works around the technology space, but I've got a particular interest in influencer marketing. I think the interest comes from the fact that social capital is going to be a really significant part of our reality now, but also sort of future over the next 10 to 15 years. And if I can do something that helps bring the technology to allow influencers to monetize their audience and market themselves in some way, that's very appealing. So that was the start of Webfluential. And I've been running Webfluential for sort of 5 years now, and very interested in kind of how the space evolves and changes as time goes by.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when Webfluential launched, you guys were kind of first to market in South Africa, and it was very exciting. So it was the start of many big things.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. So we obviously have you on today to speak to us a bit more about the changes that Facebook's going through, especially where it will affect influencer marketing on the marketing side and also on the influencer side. So what shifts are we seeing at the moment?
Sure, it's very interesting, and I think it's primarily centered around user privacy. So, I mean, so much happened in 2008 and 9 around the leaking of people's personal data, and we've seen technology companies come under the whip, but also being proactive around managing their users' privacy a lot better. So it's sort of sparked the start of GDPR. There's obviously been a lot of news in the press around Mark Zuckerberg and how he deals with that. So that's really the primary driver. And how it relates to influencers is the Facebook platform, which primarily is Facebook itself, but also the two acquisitions that it made, which are namely Instagram and WhatsApp, are kind of key components around delivering the full customer experience to users, which is really a sense of community, which you get from Facebook, content, which you get on Facebook and Instagram, and then ultimately commerce. So you can buy the things that you like from the people that you trust. And that's sort of a blend of having a conversation on WhatsApp, seeing it on Instagram, and then purchasing it. So what Facebook is really looking to do, given that it acquired those two businesses, is just looking to streamline its privacy a lot better. So they've released a whole bunch of new tools, and they've got obviously some requirements in terms of how brands work with influencers, but it's all underpinned by giving the customer a great experience that they can trust in, and also be able to manage the users' privacy and data appropriately.
So that's a great thing, actually. We shouldn't be scared of this at all.
No, obviously it's change, and industry and people don't like change, and when they have to learn new habits, that's obviously there's a point of resistance around that. But it's ushering in a lot more awareness around what people are actually doing. Not everyone is tech savvy, and they might not know, if they post an update that their data gets shared with certain places or companies unknowingly. So I think it's just in the interests of transparency, really.
I just see people do all those. I don't know if you see people in your timeline. It's usually the older people who does those stupid little quizzes that tells you kind of what you were in a past life and something like that. And I'm just always like, please stop doing that. You're just giving them so much information.
Yeah, for sure.
So does this also impact Instagram? Obviously.
It does. And the way to think about it is, Instagram was its own business, and when it got acquired by Facebook, it obviously had all the back end tools to manage users' accounts and Instagram's privacy relationships with the user. But this change is now centering all of that privacy and permissioning from Facebook. And whatever you declare from Facebook obviously translates then into your Facebook account, but also your Instagram and your WhatsApp account. So what's happened for Instagram is Facebook has deprecated the API and the in-depth reporting that it used to be able to do on influencer posts. And now that's all kind of being run through Facebook. So for the creator, that's just one place that they can manage everything. And for developers, at least there's one sort of development tools and one integration that they have to build and maintain, rather than having to do it at two different places.
Okay, so it's just kind of streamlining things while also taking care of that privacy issue.
Exactly.
Awesome. So what exactly does that mean for marketers running influencer campaign on both Facebook and Instagram? What's changing?
Well, if you think about it from someone that's wanting to publish an ad to the Facebook or Instagram community, they can do that as usual. They can do that from Business Manager or Ads Manager. They can set up their ad and the demographics that they're looking to target. And from that single place, they can say, I want this to show on Facebook and or Instagram. So that's just one channel that they need to manage, which is easier for them, but it also gives them a comparison on a like-for-like basis. So they can compare the traction, reach, resonance, kind of engagement of posts on those two channels, and then they can track that all the way through to how that converted into sales for them. But for influencer campaigns, that's where it becomes a bit more interesting, is because the influencer needs to share their basically the keys to their insights, and they do that via an API. And it's not likely that an influencer would just hand those keys over to any old campaign manager or brand or any set of brands, because they've got to manage that with a lot of people. So the value that we look to add is just being a single point that influencers can connect to. And then many brands and influencers alike can go and see those performance metrics. And when they want to run an ad, they obviously have to get the influencer to produce the content. And then they can boost that with paid media quite easily. So we basically the infrastructure rails to allow influencer marketing to happen across Facebook and Instagram at scale without tripping up any permissioning issues. We had to go through obviously a very deep audit by Facebook to make sure that we are managing everyone's privacy appropriately, and the things that we surface are in line with what they deem is responsible. So we kind of take all the risk away from the marketer or brand who might bump up against something that they maybe shouldn't have or inadvertently did. So we just kind of the guardrails for brand safety.
And that is fantastic, because I know a lot of marketers really stress about those things because they can't keep up with the changes all the time. So it's really nice to have like a third party that's trusted, that already has done the homework, and they know what they're doing, which is fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's good, learning for us as well, just to understand how all these things work. But we're playing the ecosystem, and that's one of the things that we bring to the market in terms of value add.
So when will these changes come into effect, Murray?
So influencers have been given an opportunity for about the last 18 months to be able to convert their Instagram account to a professional account. And professional means you could either set it up as a business or as a creator. And by migrating your Instagram account to one of those versions gives you a lot more detail into the performance of your content. You can see things like who unfollowed you. You can see how many actual people saw your content. You can see who saved it. A lot more than what you would on a basic account. And so they've given creators an amount of time to be able to do that. But then Facebook flipped the switch then for businesses who are working on that API. So effective the 1st of April, businesses no longer had access to the Instagram API reporting metrics. They had to get access to those via Facebook, and that meant applying for the use, showing Facebook what you want to do, and then getting approval to be able to do it.
Most of you know that Webfluential is our podcast sponsor. But did you know that my co-host Anne heads up the agency? And that is the first ever boutique agency in South Africa that specializes in developing strategy for influencer marketing. Anne and the team are experts in the field, and have spent years honing their skills and knowledge about influencer marketing and at some of the country's biggest PR and media agencies. The moment that you think you might want an influencer campaign, make sure to call or email them first, because without strategy, it might not have the outcomes that you would like and are looking for. In addition to talking all things influence on this podcast, and also puts together the fantastic Webfluential newsletter that comes out every month. And this is another way for you to keep up to date with the industry. The link to latest newsletter is in the show notes. Check it out, and if you like, please subscribe. Anne's contact details are also on there. Let's keep the conversation flowing.
So before the 1st of April, could anyone just work with that API without actually having to apply for this?
So you could, there's sort of a journey to go through. You could apply to work on it, and then if you wanted your app to be published, you had to get approval from Facebook. So you had to submit the use case to Facebook to say, we're looking to do this, and do you think that that's okay to do? Is it in line with your privacy guidelines?
I've got a question about that. You know, all those third-party apps that promises people that they'll get 10,000 followers if they pay $2 a month or whatever it is. Did they use those APIs, and are they not kind of cut off from all of this because they're kind of fraudulent?
Yeah, so I think what definitely happened is on the 1st of April, a lot of businesses went out of business when they were relying primarily on either the old Instagram API, or they were kind of sailing a bit close to the wind with regards the use of users' data. So Facebook revoked everyone's API access, and everyone had to reapply. So they were kind of looking at it through a more detailed lens now to check really what people were up to. So I think a lot of kind of
say it.
Businesses that were that were kind of pushing the boundaries a bit may have stopped their business.
Okay, I actually really love that, because it will go a long way in helping to curb that influencer fraud that we see crop up all the time, which is fantastic.
Definitely. I think, if you're a brand or marketer, and, the idea of fake followers or, brand safety is a thing, and you wary of kind of tripping something up there, it really weighs on you in your experience. But if you've got all the right support and the right technology in place, it's actually such a great way to get a message out to an audience, because it's trusted, it's credible, and there's nothing really to worry about. So
absolutely,
it's a good customer experience.
I agree. If you do it the right way, it just works so beautifully.
Yeah.
So so then we come to can you explain for us what's the difference? Because social media listening tool, and then kind of a back end auditing connected influencer marketing tool, especially when it comes to audience data and insights. Because I think a lot of people, when they hear social listening tool, they think that is fantastic and you have all this data, when in real life, I always kind of feel like it's just scraping data off the internet. Whereas when you have kind of back-end data, you really have the actual data, but people seem to get confused between those two.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and almost gray area. But I mean, I think one way to look at the difference is is kind of scraping of data versus opt-in data. It's all around consent, and just like any relationship, it's healthy if both parties are aware about what's happening and both are giving consent to that data being shared. So in a scraping environment, obviously, you can turn on Twitter and you can read someone's tweet, and that is effectively social media listening. But if you're using that at commercial scale, where you've got spiders going to download all of that content, and you're running natural language processing over it, and you looking at the avatar images and deciding, if does this person look American or do they look Chinese, or there's always an approximation to it, and scraping of data has a confidence interval. So there's some truth to the data, but it is not the full truth. Whereas in an API driven setting, obviously the influencer has given consent to their data being exposed, and in exchange for giving consent, whoever they're sharing it with gets the full truth and full transparency into the statistics that relate to their content. So, I think there's obviously a gray line between what's commercially viable and then what's, just being able to read your Twitter stream. So, the best thing to do is obviously having consent if you're going to be using data commercially, and someone might not be aware of the fact that you're using their tweet or their insights or an approximation of the insights. So, in terms of our business, we just look to kind of stick to the consent basis. We think that that's the right way to manage a relationship between not just the influencer, but also the influencer and the brand or agency.
Sure. And also, I think very importantly, as like you said, when you have that back-end access and the consent, you actually get true data and not just an estimation. So you're like, well, I think this is what's happening. Exactly.
Yeah. And there's degrees of that. So there's obviously the declared data that's, people say this is what happened. And then from the platform, they can say this is how many people saw the content and engaged with it. There's always layers of interpretation, where did it change, public policy, or where did it ignite some, following or change in behavior? You're always going to have those layers of abstraction. But if you start with the full truth, the layers on top of that are more likely to be the right ones.
I love that. So, Murray, please give our listeners your top 3 tips in terms of what to look out for when they're selecting an influencer marketing tool, especially with the help of execution of strategies.
Sure. So maybe, I guess, if there's 3 tips, maybe I could give one for each of the creators, the agencies, and the brands.
Sure.
So for creators, I'd say probably the ability to get value from a platform that's more than just jobs. So, because for creators, it's really their lifelong passion to produce content that's meaningful to their audience. They don't exist purely for brands. They exist to engage with their audience. And if they're involved in a platform that gives them additional insights, tips, tricks, references, comparisons, leaderboards, etc., that all helps them to improve their profession and their ability to produce even more engaging content. So, think about it from a perspective of not just coming in to work with brands, but to learn about your profession, I'd say. For agencies, I'd say they should look for technology that helps them to compare influencers on a like-for-like basis. So if you have what we talked about just now, if you have scraped data, it doesn't really give you an ability to compare apples with apples. But if you have true API access, you can really say, okay, let's do the metrics here. This person's engagement rate is typically 3% and this person's is 10%. So that's a good thing in terms of how much their audience trusts them, believes in their content, and that the brand can participate in that conversation. So sure. I'd encourage for agencies to be able to do that when thinking about who to choose and how to work with influencers. And then for brands, because brands are being supported by their agencies. So for brands to trust that their message can be shared in a kind of user-generated content style. So influencers and content creators will take the brands that they like and they will incorporate that into their story and they will share that with their audience. It's never going to be on brand. The icon is never going to be, padded with enough spacing that, the CI person would want. But everyone will love their brand for a particular reason, and that's the true message. And, so if I can encourage brands to trust in their users to share that message, and then from an audience and distribution perspective, where they would normally pay for, out of home, or they'd pay for radio or television, the new normal that we're finding ourselves in, where everyone is pretty much working from home and glued to their cell phone, is all of this content is being shared on your social channels. And to get the most out of that user-generated content is to put paid media behind it, so that you can get that to similar audiences, but make the most of it. In the same way that a traditional agency might have paid for the production of a television advert, that's paying your influencer to produce the content, but then they were also paying the TV stations to flight that advert every Sunday night at 8:00. Now your media must go in exactly the same form to pay to get that content in front of more eyeballs at a higher frequency. And that's, that's really doing what you used to do, but just in a digital social format. So I think that's the tip I'd give to brands.
Those are great tips. And I love the way how you explain kind of influencer marketing in kind of all traditional ways so people can understand it better. Because usually when you say paid media, people go, then why do we have influencers? But that's a really, really nice way of explaining it. So
cool, thanks. Sure.
Yeah. This was a really informative session, and I think everyone who's listening would understand a little bit more why Facebook is doing what they're doing, and how they're doing it, and also that it's not really a terrible thing that they're doing. They ultimately kind of trying to make sure that our information is shared in an ethical way, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that wisdom with us. And before you go, can you please just tell our listeners where they can connect with you online?
Sure. So thanks so much for having a conversation with me today. And I think it's great that that brands and influencers are interested in making that connection between each other. And if we can help in any way, I encourage people to go to webfluential.com and sign up as an influencer, creator, or brand or agency. And if they'd like to chat to me, I don't really chat as much as I used to on my blog or Twitter. I'm a little bit scared of the general population of comments at the moment. But anyone's welcome to email me on murray@webfluential.com.
Wonderful. Murray, we have noticed that you're not so much on the Twitter street the last couple of years. But when you do speak, you do speak sense. So anyone should follow you. Where can they follow you?
So on Twitter, Instagram, or on my blog at murrayleg is my handle, and murrayleg.com.
And on LinkedIn, can anyone connect with you there?
Sure, they can. I think it's the same if you search on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Murray, thank you so much for making time for us. We know you're super busy. Even though we're working from home, we're still working hard. And we hope that everyone out there is too. So thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, Anne. Chat soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.